Thanks everybody for joining us today. You're here for 5 ways to use sales intelligence for success in 2020 with Vengreso and SalesIntel. So today you have Bernie Borges with us from Vengreso. Bernie is the CMO over there. Welcome, Bernie.
Hey, Jason. Good to be here.
Good, good. Tell us really briefly what Vengreso does.
Sure, briefly. So Vengreso is known as a digital sales transformation company. We work with companies that have a B2B sales team, and we essentially put them through a digital sales training program that modernizes them and helps them really find, engage, and connect with prospects, and then turn those connections into sales conversations. So that's what we do in a nutshell.
Great, great. My name is Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Growth at SalesIntel. At SalesIntel, we pride ourselves on providing the highest quality B2B buyer data out there. So if you're in sales or marketing, you need to build your funnel and figure out the right people to reach out to at the right companies. We're the solution for you. All right, so today, the 5 items that we're going to be covering, what metrics should sales leaders use to set up sales territories accurately? What tools should sales reps have available to them? How does social selling integrate with sales data? What are the 3 specific actions sales leaders should direct reps to do in social selling? And which channels are going to be your most effective, most important channels in sales prospecting? So things to consider: email, phone, video, social media, events, SMS, text messages. So we'll cover all of those. All right.
And we're going to do that in 30 minutes.
Yes, we've got a full one ahead of us.
All right. Let's
All
do
right.
it.
So yeah, to start it off with, so what metrics should you be paying attention to as far as setting up sales territories and divvying up responsibilities across your team? First one, pretty obvious, geographic. Where are your existing potential customers located? Staffing, you want to also make sure that you have accurately and accordingly staffed to be able to support this. Things to consider importantly for this. So, a lot of companies and organizations these days have moved to a predominantly, if not entirely, inside sales model, which means that you have salespeople in one centralized location. Face-to-face selling is not as important or crucial as it once was, but it still is really important. Some industries, sell almost exclusively still face-to-face. But even things like B2B SaaS companies like SalesIntel, where we rely on a in-house inside sales team, having those face-to-face meetings is still really important. Our close ratio for face-to-face meetings goes way up. And so if you have an importance around those things, even if you're not doing face-to-face, you have to keep in consideration things like time zones. So if you're on the East Coast, you're selling to the West Coast, and you've got to take that into account. You want to make sure that you've got people that are staying late, or vice versa. If you're on the West Coast selling to the East Coast, you're going to want to make sure that you've got people coming in early in the morning so that they can hit the phones and be able to man inboxes as people are starting work on the other side. Same story, obviously, if you're selling internationally. So knowing where your customers are located and then making sure you have the right people to be able to target those, whether that's geographically based off of time zones or whatever. Spoke about the inside sales model. So a lot of companies now have moved to a tiered approach to selling. So starting with an SDR team, sales development reps that bridge the gap sort of between sales and marketing. And then handing that over to a BDR team, business development team, that qualifies those and sets it up, tees it up for the account executives to take it across the finish line. You also want to make sure that for a lot of companies, they have different segments, different industries, different verticals, different personas that they target. The more effectively you segment off of that, the more effective your sales and marketing strategies are going to be. Important to that is you want to make sure that your salespeople are adequately trained and equipped to be able to target and pitch to and sell to those different segments. And so having your team broken up based off of those industries, those verticals, or those personas you're selling to can be an effective strategy for that. And then last is best product market fit to tie that in with the sales goals that you have for the team.
Okay,
Bernie,
Jason.
yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
you know what I want to do? I want to ask the attendees to put into the chat if they have an inside sales model, an outside sales model, or both. Just keep it simple. One word: inside, outside, or both. Just to kind of get a feel for what we're seeing from the attendees. So we're seeing both, both, which does not surprise me at all, right, Jason? We're seeing
Exactly.
that to be pretty much the norm these days.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific.
Cool. What's worked for you, Bernie, both internally and with organizations that you've worked with?
Yeah, well, certainly the both model is definitely the prevalent model today. And so in terms of really the metrics that sales leaders need to set up the sales territories, it starts with the sales goals and then backs into, what's the distribution of customers across either market segments or geography, and then just kind of peeling back the onion from there, and then getting into like, all right, how are we going to distribute that total available market among the sales team? Do we have enough people on the sales team currently, or do we have open recs? How many recs do we need? How many more salespeople do we need to be able to make the number? So I think you've covered the basic metrics and the approach to market here. So in the interest of our 30-minute webinar, I think we can move on to our next one.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So which tools is it important for sales reps to have available right now? The key to this is across all of these tools. Whoops. Whoa. All right. So the key across all these tools, sorry about that, I had a technical hiccup. Integration is going to be the key to all of this. So sales tools done right will be a force multiplier for your team. You're going to make your team more effective, more efficient. You're going to vastly accelerate ramp times. You're going to increase retention. You're going to increase effectiveness across the team. But the key operative there is if it's done right. Adding tools willy-nilly, not making sure they're fully optimized, not making sure your team members are fully trained on it, and in particular, not having all of these tools integrated with each other can be a recipe for disaster. And so integration becomes the key to this. If you properly integrate your platforms, you avoid data silos, you avoid double entry, you avoid all of these inefficiencies that everybody hates about tools. And make your team actually more efficient, but it's also going to vastly increase adoption of these productivity tools. It's going to increase compliance with your processes that you put in place. And ultimately, as you try and onboard and bring on these tools, having them properly integrated is going to be crucial to having successful deployments. So what are the tools? Sorry, were you going to add something?
I was just going to add, central to that is your very first bullet right there, and that's the CRM, right? Sales reps live in CRM. So the integration of all these other tools really needs to be integrated with CRM in order for reps to be able to use them most productively. Because otherwise, as you mentioned, Jason, it becomes overwhelming and unproductive for sales reps.
Yeah, absolutely. CRM becomes such a crucial piece to this. I mean, most people are familiar with CRM as, kind of your big complex database for keeping track of everything customer related, but increasingly CRMs become crucial to act as that technology hub. And so you may have, a half dozen, a dozen different platforms and systems that you're working off of. But for most organizations, the CRM becomes the place that all of those integrate into. And so if you have them all properly integrated with the CRM, then you don't necessarily have to worry about each of them being connected with or integrated with each other individually. So it decreases the number of nodes you have to worry about because all you have to do is make sure each one is connected and integrated properly with the CRM.
It's also great for sales leadership because sales leadership can go to one place and really get visibility into all the things that are being tracked by other tools because it's integrated into that one hub known as CRM.
Yep, absolutely. So on top of CRM, I mean, those CRMs largely become table stakes. Additional ones that you may or may not have experience with, dialer telephony platforms, so that you've got the ability to quickly and easily dial through lists, be able to record those calls, those conversations, be able to add disposition logic. So if a demo was set, being able with a click of the button, be able to update records, set follow-up tasks. Prospect engagement, sales acceleration platforms. These would be things like Outreach, SalesLoft, sales enablement platforms. I'll go through these pretty quickly because we also have a infographic to show you on this. Productivity help tools, social management platforms, video selling, conversation intelligence, data partners like SalesIntel. These are just a few, and to show you, how big the space is. Here's something from Vendor Neutral, where it gives you a breakdown of some of the leaders in these different categories. And so, I don't know about you, Bernie. I've had a lot of experience with a lot of these different players over the years. What are some of the ones that have been some of your favorites?
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of experience with perhaps as many of them as you have, Jason, but certainly some of them. So because of what we do at Vengreso and how we help salespeople engage more, the sales enablement space is one that we're pretty familiar with. So a lot of the companies, and you can see that's the biggest slice there of representation, right? So the sales enablement space, where that technology allows salespeople to access the content that they need to engage effectively. The other one that we have experience with, which we're really high on, is the conversation intelligence space, which is down toward the bottom. You see Goncourse and Exec Vision. Those are the three companies there. And that's when sales reps are having calls on any platform. Those calls are being recorded, and it's way more than just recording. It actually gives you intelligence, what keywords are being used, who's talking more, who's talking less, and just really gives leadership insights into the effectiveness of those calls. It even gives sales reps themselves the insights that they need into the effectiveness or ineffectiveness. The other category that I'll just mention here briefly in our time together is video selling, because it's perhaps not one of the biggest and best known. And that's the idea of being able to empower salespeople to create short videos so that they can use those videos as a way to engage with their customers and prospects very efficiently, and again with nice metrics and analytics involved. And you can attach things or embed things like proposals and literature and that sort of thing into the video message. So that's just a few that come to mind. I mean, you could spend 30 minutes just on everything that's on this infographic, but to your point, rather than just supply the bullets on the previous slide, we wanted to give you this visual for everyone to just kind of check it out and go out and do your own homework on that.
Yeah, and real quick on it, in light of time, but obviously you look at this and you see how overwhelming it seems, and
Yeah.
certainly if you have each one of these as their own little silo, getting people to use it and use it effectively is going to be a nightmare. But to walk you real quickly of some configurations and use cases that have been super effective for me in the past would be using marketing automation to do your initial outreach and qualification, lead scoring, stuff like that, and then based off of those criteria, passing that to a dialing platform like a Connect and Sell, like a Dial Source, where reps can dial through numbers quickly and automate and accelerate the follow-up that's happening. And then as those connections happen, pass that over to a BDR team that may be primarily working out of a prospect engagement platform like Outreach or SalesLoft to try and follow up, qualify, set demos, stuff like that. And then as those demos get set, using something like a Chorus or an Exec Vision or a Gong on the conversation intelligence piece to be able to see the effectiveness of those demos. What can we learn from it? What can we improve on? And then being able to use a content management platform to be able to send out additional pieces of content, tying that in with DocuSign or Adobe Sign to be able to execute a contract. You can start seeing how all of these pieces properly engineered and layered in together become a really game changer as far as a tool versus them being these overwhelming individual things that you've got to worry about.
Exactly. And we have the link at the bottom of that slide. So
Yeah,
the link to that infographic is available there.
perfect. All right, Bernie, your guys' specialty is social selling, so we'll let you run with this one.
Yeah, I want to put a quick definition to social selling, and we actually talk more about digital selling than social selling, but no, social selling is pretty well known from a terminology standpoint, and we really consider it the practice of using social channels to find and engage and connect with prospects to start sales conversations. The thing that's really important in that whole sentence is to start sales conversations. You don't sell on social media. We're talking B2B, we're not talking B2C that might have, a link to something where you buy something on an e-commerce website. We're talking, you have to have a conversation to sell a B2B offering. And so social selling is that practice of finding, engaging, and connecting so that you can start sales conversations. So I just wanted to get grounded, Jason, on that definition before, we go too much deeper on it.
Yeah, no, that's super useful.
So in terms of some specific actions that sales leaders really should be directing their reps to do is it starts with having a LinkedIn profile with customer-centric messaging. Unfortunately, we see so many LinkedIn profiles that are written like a resume, and they say things like, I'm a quota-crushing sales rep, I've made 100% club 10 years in a row, I'm a great contract negotiator, I'm a hunter, all this sales speak that means nothing to the buyer. Zero. There's no value in that to the buyer. So it's really about delivering customer-centric messaging. And so, Jason, can we actually jump over to the example that
Sure.
we have teed up for that? And I'll show it real quickly here. Monica Parker, who, full disclosure, is one of our clients. I want to point out, not only does she have branding in the banner, meaning her company's branded up there, she has a nice photo, she's smiling and all that, but look at her headline, Creating Secure Network Infrastructure and Telecom Solutions for Education Institutions. She calls out what she does and who she does it for. And then in the About section, you can skim through it. I'm not going to read it to you. You can skim through it. And as you skim through it, you're going to see it's not a resume. It isn't about her. It's about how she helps her customers. It's easy to read, and it's all customer-centric messaging. And that's the point. A LinkedIn profile should be written through the lens of the customer with customer-centric messaging. So it starts with that. So Jason, we want to jump back now. It
Sure.
starts with that in terms of the three specific actions that we want to really recommend is make sure that the LinkedIn profile has customer messaging. And by the way, I'll cite a statistic from LinkedIn, their State of Sales report. 62% of decision makers look for an informative LinkedIn profile before they decide to talk to that salesperson. 62% before. So it's very important. The next one is to engage through personalization. Unfortunately, too many salespeople are directed by their sales leader to send a blanket message out to all their LinkedIn connections or everybody on their email list. And 9 times out of 10, it is saying something that's just wrong about that individual who's getting the message. So yes, it takes some extra effort. Also, with the right automation, right technology, you can make that easier. But you've got to engage with personalization. You've got to make it unique to that individual and personalize it to that individual. Especially if you're selling a high ticket item, then it's even more important that to take a little extra time to make sure that you're sending a personalized message. And then the third one is to
Yeah.
make sure you're always adding value. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there. I mean, I wind up saying this all the time, especially over the last couple of years. But my little soapbox on that piece is, I think we all got carried away and abused the platforms that really proliferated over the last 5 or 10 years. In particular, marketing automation and sales enablement platforms that allow you to be able to do outreach and dialing and emailing and stuff at scale. And so that's where everybody's phones ring off the hook with cold calls, and everybody's inbox is full of unsolicited emails and stuff like that. And so it's harder than ever to break through the noise. And the key to doing that is being able to personalize your content and add value. If you're not doing that and you're just doing the old spray and pray approach, then you're largely dead in the water right now.
Absolutely. You nailed it. It is harder than ever before to reach your prospect. It is just Prospects hide behind email. They don't answer the phone, and it's just more difficult than ever before. Not to mention, prospects are busier than ever before. They're juggling more responsibilities, so they're very selective, and they're doing their homework before they even agree to talk to a salesperson. So this last point here is also huge. You've got to add value. You've got to be thinking about how you reach out to people across the segmentation of your list, so that it's not one size fits all in terms of your outreach. You've got to make sure that you've identified the specific personas, so the same message shouldn't go to a chief financial officer as a chief information officer or a CEO, right? They may all be C-suite people, but you've got to make sure the message is tailored to the persona, and then know what topics are really performing best for those roles. That's where a sales enablement platform can really help, by actually recommending the content that salespeople should be using for different personas in different sales situations. So I'll leave it at that in the interest of time, Jason.
Yep. All right. So now on to, we've talked about, how do you divvy this up as far as territories? How do you reach out and successfully social sell? Now, what channel should you be using to be able to reach out and connect? Like we said, it's harder than ever to get in front of people. So how do you do that? Where do you actually go to reach out? The short answer to that is all of the above. This was a great stat that you shared with me, Bernie. But increasing your number of channels you're reaching out from 1 to 3 leads to a 400% improvement in engagement. And so that speaks to how crowded it is and how difficult it is to get people's attention, but also how important it is to do multi-channel approaches to that outreach. The other short answer to it is go where they are. So if you see somebody's not active at all on LinkedIn, then LinkedIn's probably not the best place to reach out to them, or vice versa. If they're extremely active on LinkedIn, then that's maybe one of your best channels. So, pay attention to where they're active, pay attention to where you've connected or had indications that they're engaged in the past to be able to figure out where to focus your attention.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the short ones that most people are familiar with, the top: email, phone, video, social media, events. SMS text messaging is one that's sort of the kind of brave new world right now. You're seeing more and more of that occurring. People are getting more willing to engage around it and less standoffish about it, but you still see a lot of people where they're really upset if you send them an unsolicited text message. So for the most part, what I'm seeing effective on that side is being contextual, where a conversation has already begun. So, in particular around like, hey, you have a demo coming up, so sending them a text message confirmation or reminder around that. That type of thing where it's contextual, they expect it. It's not cold outreach. You still see people get pretty peeved and upset over that type of thing. The one we didn't include in here, but I always find interesting seeing reemerge as a channel, is direct mailers. It speaks to how crowded everything's gotten and all of these digital trends that we have. That direct mail is becoming a channel again that's starting to get traction and attention. I don't know whether you've seen that one much on your end, Bernie, but I see that one coming up more and more.
Yeah, and direct mail has actually grown up quite a bit. It's gotten pretty sophisticated. There are ways that you can personalize direct mail. You can include things like a screenshot of their website or a screenshot of something that's relevant to that individual or that company in the direct mail piece, so that it's not a generic direct mail piece, but something that is unique to that individual or to that company, or a combination of the two. And it can be a differentiator. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's really cool seeing people disrupt that and kind of blend the old school with a lot of the new digital trends and stuff like that. So is outreach being done well? So we talked about segmentation, value add. You want to make sure that your salespeople, your team members are crafting well done outreach, whether it's emails, social messages, whatever. A big one we didn't talk about, and this one's really basic on the tools side, is something like a Grammarly. It's free. They have a premium version you can pay for, but the free version is very full featured. And it's just an extension. It'll run. It'll proof your emails, your messages, even your Google Docs. So it's a great way to be able to quickly and easily see, am I missing spelling mistakes? Am I missing grammar errors? Does this read well? Stuff like that. So using templates, using tools like Grammarly, all of these can be ways to help that.
And Jason, real quick, I want to come back to the first bullet because I want to just put a little exclamation point on video. I mentioned that when we were looking at the infographic of all the sales tools, and I mentioned that video is one of them. And it's just another way for a salesperson to be different and send a personalized video to a prospect that's one-on-one. It can break through the clutter. It's just one way to increment from that 2 channels of email and phone to that third one where the engagement rate goes up 400%. That's a real data point. And we have a link to the infographic that was in that slide a few slides ago. And video is one of those that can be very, very effective.
Yeah, and the great thing with video is it can be combined with just about any of those channels. So you can use video and embed it. You can use it to link to, so you can put it in emails. You can put it in your social outreach. You can put it up on a landing page, you name it. And so, having cross-functional pieces and channels like that can be extremely effective as well.
Yep.
So we talked about scripting templates versus just running it off the cuff. Of course, some people are really good at doing that, but the problem is that's hard to scale and hard to train. So having good scripts, having good templates, having good tools in order to proofread are really crucial to that. Data on individual level. So knowing, again, if you're personalizing, if you're segmenting, then it's crucial that you've got good information on that person and that industry, because you can segment till you're blue in the face, but if your company data or your person's contact data is not accurate, then you're going to wind up segmenting incorrectly. And in some ways, it's oftentimes worse to send the wrong content to the wrong person than it is to send just generic content. So personalization, segmentation is great, but you got to make sure you do it right. And then another one, talking about different channels based off of where they're most active, where they tend to engage best. Some anecdotal for me, salespeople in general, my experience has been, are really comfortable and can prefer to connect over the phone. It sort of drives me crazy sometimes with my salespeople, where they have a whole bunch of information they need to give me, I need to digest and be able to dig into. It lends itself much better to an email where I've got all of that mapped out there. I can reference all of that stuff, but instead their preference is to pick up the phone and call me. And so I wind up having to say, all right, can you send me an email with all that information? But my experience has been salespeople tend to like and prefer to talk over the phone. Me as a marketer, I've seen more often than not, marketers tend to function and work better in the email, in inboxes. And those are some generalities, but in general, pay attention to where people are engaged and what channels you've been successful getting engagement off of, and work according to that. Anything before we hop over to the other one to add to that, Bernie?
No, I agree. The only thing I'll add is, we did a webinar earlier this year where we had 3 CMOs in the webinar, and we asked them, how do salespeople reach you? Because CMO is a target persona. And the one thing that they all 3 of them said was, I never accept a call that I don't know, the caller ID, so a cold call. I also don't accept cold emails. So, when they were asked, well, then how do we get in your inbox? How do we meet with you? And it was things like, a referral from someone that I trust, or relevant content that you post that, catches my eye because it's something of interest to me, right? So, it just depends on the persona that you're calling into. So yeah, that's what I want to add there.
Yeah, it was funny because I would answer it basically the same way. Reaching out to me directly via LinkedIn, you're not going to be very effective. If it's a phone number I don't recognize, I'm not going to pick it up. My inbox is full of cold emails, and I mean, I've written more cold emails for my sales team than I can count, so I can recognize them, 99% of the time, and don't even bother with them. most effective way to get in touch with me or get in front of me is to have enticing content or have a conversation with one of my team members where they can sort of vet it and come to me and say, hey, this looks really interesting. I think you should take a look at it. And probably 90% of the platforms or B2B solutions that I've bought over the last 5 years have come to me that way.
Yeah. One data point is that 84% of B2B buyers begin their buying journey with a referral, meaning they ask their network, they ask their peers for referrals or recommendations on suppliers and solutions that they should consider on a given topic. 84%.
Cool. Well, I know we are slightly over our time, so I'll try and, in the interest of everybody's time, I'll wrap this as quickly. So we've got a couple of resources here from us on the SalesIntel side. We've got a link to a case study with 41 Orange, one of our customers. 41 Orange, using our data, was able to vastly reduce the amount of time spent prospecting as well as increase the effectiveness of their outreach. So much so that their savings was the equivalent of a full-time employee. So as they continue to scale that up across the team, they continue to see these types of savings and improvements.
Cool. And on the Vengreso resource, we have a report that we published earlier this year called The State of Digital Selling with LinkedIn. We surveyed 862 B2B salespeople across 5 industries. We asked them 10 questions. And then this report summarizes the findings of those questions along with commentary from 15 executives, which is the faces that you see there. And so the findings were pretty eye-opening. It's not a good report card. The State of Digital Selling has a lot of room for improvement among B2B salespeople. I'll give you a sneak preview. One data point is that 59% of salespeople that were surveyed have no content at all on their LinkedIn profile. And by content, I mean like content that someone can click on and read or open or watch a video or something to that effect, which again is a disservice to the buyer. So that's available. That report is available at stateofdigitalselling.com.
Great. All right, so obviously we are a little bit over on time. So in the interest of everybody's time, we'll wrap the primary conversation here. But anybody that would like to stick around, has any questions for us, I know I'm available for a little bit. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So yeah, if anybody has any follow-up questions for myself or Bernie, pop those in the Zoom panel.
And while we're waiting, Jason, for a question for anybody that does have a few minutes to stick around, I would ask a question. Is there anything that we presented here today that was eye-opening or shocking or interesting? Just any one of the points that we delivered today that someone has any reaction to.
Yeah, I know for me, the stat that you shared with me of the 400% increase in engagement as you add 2 additional channels was great, because I mean, that's something I've preached for a long time and I've known the effectiveness of it, but nobody had ever put a stat around that for me.
Right.
So yeah, that was fantastic to see somebody had actually gone out and done the work to study that and come up with an actual stat on the lift. And I was honestly surprised. I would have expected like maybe a 2 or 3 times increase, but seeing that it was as much as 400% was really eye-opening.
Yeah. The stat that I cited pretty much on a daily basis, because it is so compelling. I mentioned it already before, and that's that 62% of decision makers look for an informative LinkedIn profile. So the thing is that if salespeople are engaging and if you're sharing content, that's great. So what do you think a prospect does? They go to the sales rep's LinkedIn profile. And unfortunately, too many sales reps are either not aware of that, which I don't know how they wouldn't be, because you can see who's viewed your profile, but maybe they're not aware of the fact that their LinkedIn profile is not written with customer messaging and it's written like a resume. Like I said, it's very common to say I'm a quota crusher, I'm a great negotiator, I made quota, etc. And so that stat of 62% of decision makers are looking for that informative LinkedIn profile. It's also coupled in their report with another stat that says 77% of decision makers are looking for sales reps who have insights about their company, about their business, about their problem, right? So just a couple of really compelling stats. We have a question or comment here from Jason. Do you prefer to have a set cadence for all of these channels of outreach, or do you qualify per prospect to evaluate what you think the best channel might be first and then prioritize channels? Great question, Jason. So my initial thought on that is that, first of all, I'm not a fan of boiling the ocean. I'm not a fan of going out and getting, 6 of the tools that we showed from that landscape and launching them, all on a Monday morning. That's usually not going to work. So, really prioritizing, where does the sales team need the biggest improvement in productivity? And sort of ease the tools in according to what the priorities are. And then, yeah, I do believe that having a set cadence across all the channels of outreach on a tool-by-tool basis does give you the ability to then measure the impact of that tool before you start adding more tools on. Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so as with most things like this, I think you can err on either side. So there's huge advantages to having, a cadence and templates and, content mapped out and stuff like that. In particular, you decrease variability. You can, for a lot of team members, improve the quality of their messaging. You can help prevent stuff from falling through the cracks because you can rely on reminders and stuff like that to make sure that people follow up. The flip side of that is, team members can wind up relying on that as a crutch, and so they stop doing the stuff that they should be doing as best practices. So making sure that they follow up, checking in, the things that don't lend itself very well to automation. And of course, the more that you try and automate things or do things at scale, the less personalized they're always going to be. And so there's always a trade-off. There's advantages and disadvantages in going in either direction. And so, my ideal scenario is that, I have a team that's fairly well, established and experienced, so I can give them some wiggle room, some ability to kind of go off and do their own thing. And I know that they're going to be, good and reliable and on message with that. But at the same time, they have the tools in place to help facilitate that and make them more efficient and effective at what they're doing. So you don't tie them so the only thing they can do is templates or do minimal editing to their content or their outreach, stuff like that. They're not completely beholden to their sequences, but you've got that there to help enable them.
Yeah, and I'm also looking back at Jason's question. It's funny, we have a question from Jason, and Jason, you and I are, on the webinar. But Jason Schober asked the question about which channels of outreach. It's kind of an action-packed question there, Jason. And so, if we just focus in on that part of your question, which channels of outreach, do you really prefer, or select the best channel? There's the data is really what's going to drive that decision, right? So if you're in an industry where the data says the best channel is email because the industry seems to respond best to that, like you were saying earlier, Jason, about marketing tends to be more email centric, then you roll with that as the primary one, right? But if you're not in an industry where one channel is prevalent, meaning the data doesn't support that there's one channel prevalent, and you have to really go by more like persona or role, or maybe even set further segmentation within the total available market, then you just have to really continue to crunch the numbers and look at the data to see, what are the channels that are performing best, and then guide and coach the sales team to use the channels according to how the data really guides you in those decisions. I mean, in the end, as always, it comes down to data.
Yeah, and I mean the industry trends, information, and stuff like that is really effective on trying to sort of bootstrap or get up and off the ground or target a new persona or new industry or vertical or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you've got enough data, enough history, a big enough end to look at, you're always best off looking at your own data. So you may be in a niche of a certain industry that differs from that overall trend of the industry. And so if your data is telling you one thing, but wider industry data is telling you something different, obviously go with your own data, assuming, with the caveat being that you've got enough of it there to be significant and not be just an aberration.
Right. And you want to be measuring what I'll call conversions along the buyer's path, not conversion of opportunity to close. I mean, of course you track that, but how are you converting from one stage of the buyer's journey? You may look at it through the lens of the sales process, but I prefer to call it the buyer's journey. So how are you converting along that path? And what are the channels that are most effective in converting? So if you have a buyer's journey that you say is 7 steps, these are the 7 steps that we typically take with the buyer, then how are you converting from one step to the other, and what are the engagement channels that are the most effective on that conversion path in that buyer's journey?
Yeah, and I think the key to it is talking about it as a path or a journey as opposed to individual little paths. So, one of the biggest problems I see with organizations is when you don't have that, cross department idea of what a journey is. So, you see this way too often where, the goal that they're optimizing around and the journey that marketers in the marketing department looks at is completely different from what sales is looking at, which is completely different from what supportive success is looking at, which is completely different from what product is looking at. And so you wind up having different departments, different people optimizing for different things, and they can oftentimes wind up in conflict with each other, if not just at a minimum not optimized across them. And so, I mean, perfect example of that would be a marketing department that's optimized around number of inbound leads. And that's their goal. And that's what they optimize around. But then you look at sales, and they're not converting any of those to qualified demos. They're not closing any of those. So the leads that the number of leads that marketing is generating may be fantastic, but the quality of those leads are crap. And so I think that's a key piece to is make sure that you're optimized across the entire journey.
Yep, all good points. Any other thoughts, comments, questions from the attendees that we still have with us? I know a few have dropped off.
We'll got one last chance for anybody to drop in anything. Otherwise, thanks everybody for sticking around for 15 minutes over. Bernie, this has been fantastic. I thank you, and I appreciate you hopping on with us. Like I mentioned, we'll send a email follow-up with a link to the deck and the recording. You can reply directly to that email to get in touch with me or Bernie, but there's also our contact information right here on the last page of the deck.
Yep. Thanks, Jason. I enjoyed it. Thanks for all the attendees for joining us today, and for those that hung around afterwards. Appreciate the additional questions and comments, and look forward to staying in touch.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.